I think the problem a lot of entrepreneurs have is they really do think people want to hear from them more than they do. I do think some ways in which people make money are pretty unacceptable, and I don't have much respect for it.
Like what?
I don't get impressed by people who just buy property. Not people who build properties, by the way. I have absolute respect for that because it's so hard to do. But the people who then just purchase them and then flog them, I don't have that much respect. I think that's a pretty easy gig. I could say a statement now, it could be completely ludicrous, and I could make a really convincing case, and we could probably clip it up in a way that made it look really, really convincing.
Come on then.
Yeah. I could say, I don't know, like, bananas cause erectile dysfunction.
Explains a lot.
Wow. Hello, welcome to the Podcasters Podcast. Me and Kane are joined today by Ben Askins. How are you, Ben?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Thanks for coming along.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, excited for this episode. You've got, is it 1.5 million followers across all your social platforms at the moment?
Yeah, roughly that, yeah.
Yeah, you're flying in the content world, but also you've founded multiple businesses. Let's start with Verb, your first venture, right?
First ever business, yeah, first baby.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, of course. So Verb was a digital marketing agency. Actually, it started off as a web design and build agency and then sort of moved into that digital marketing space. And we niched down pretty early, so we focus on the luxury side of things. So basically, you know, across multiple sectors, but very much in the high end. So working with brands like Aston Martin, Amiga, Jimmy Choo, Bloomingdale's, sort of brands such as that. And we did that for about 8-9 years, grew that. So I was 22 when I started all of that. And we sort of grew that for 8-9 years. Sort of global companies. We had office in New York, had office in the UK, and then sort of sold that in a sort of private equity deal in 2021, and had 2-year earn-out from there, really.
How many employees did you have in that business?
I think it was about 65, 70 by the time we sold. So it got to a sort of decent size. I always think like growing a business, you kind of have those sort of stages where like, when it's like 8 of you, it's very sort of all hands on deck. Everyone's doing everything. And then you slowly start to sort of build in these sort of senior management, middle management layers. So as you go through those growth stages, you have those specific challenges. But yeah, so about the sort of 65, 70 by the time we sold.
What's it like then being in your early or mid 20s and you're managing dozens of people across different continents?
Yeah, I mean, a huge shock and a huge sort of learn on the job situation. I mean, made like so many mistakes. Like, I know it's sort of tradition to say that, but like we really, really did. And like, I think the challenge was obviously, one, we hadn't done it before. 2, we're managing a lot of people at our age as well. So they didn't I think I look back sometimes, it would have almost been helpful to manage people who'd been managed properly in the past, but they hadn't been managed. So it was a real blind leading the blind situation. Because we didn't know what we were doing, they didn't know what we should be doing, and it sort of spiraled from there. But you just learn, and we got very lucky. We were very good at hiring good people to kind of help us out because we knew nothing. We knew we had to hire, so we couldn't like kid ourselves that we could do it on our own. I say we because Chris Donnelly was my business partner, who we obviously did that together. And then just sort of slowly built it out from there, really.
How did you meet Chris?
So Chris actually, so we were both at university together, but didn't actually meet till after university. Chris actually started Verb at university, and he sort of was just doing like earn a bit of extra cash, sort of building websites on the side sort of thing. And then I met him after university, sort of said, look, I'm, thinking of really going for this. And I just thought it was the coolest sounding thing ever. So I jumped aboard.
Why did you decide to go luxury?
2 reasons. One was, being fully transparent, they were the brands we wanted to work with, because, we sort of wrote down our sort of dream list of clients like really early on, and, they were all in that sort of luxury space. 2, we knew we needed to niche. I think one of the best things you can do, especially if you're an agency, is because there's so many agencies. Anyone with a laptop can start a company like that, which is great because it means there's a low barrier to entry and loads of people can get going. But you do need to differentiate yourself. So having that niche was absolutely key. And 3, we'd heard of a couple of agencies who did luxury, just been bought when we kind of started to think about it. And we sensed it as a bit of an opportunity to kind of fill that space, really.
How did you get through to those decision makers then? So again, 2 guys fresh out of uni, how are you landing such big clients?
Well, I mean, the honest truth is we didn't, right? You got to build up to that. We finished, by the time we finished, we were working with like Aston Martin, Bugatti, Amiga and stuff like that, but that certainly wasn't our entry point. We started off by, honestly, we're doing like blogs for like random people. Like we managed to get in like the Made in Chelsea lot. They were all doing fashion blogs. So we did a bit of that. We're doing a lot of those for free. We then sort of used that to kind of, win the next sort of tranche of clients, like the sort of next level up. One of our bloggers actually started to do incredibly well. She's called Ella Woodward, who became Deliciously Ella. So we kind of caught that wave and got a lot of views on our website that we had built her. And from there, we sort of built it all out from there. And, sort of won bigger and bigger clients. And slowly kind of, one of the things we did do quite well was we were good at using what we had to kind of leverage the next client and the next client up. And we were pretty effective about doing that. And just slowly sort of built it up until we were suddenly in the big dog leagues, really.
What do you have to do differently when you're working with luxury clients? What's the biggest differences?
There is a snobbery to luxury. And what I mean by that is you can't show you're too keen. Like you can't just, like a lot of, and this, it was interesting when we were bought, like one of the big differences was how, the company that bought us, how they went about getting new business. So we focused almost entirely on inbound marketing. So making them come to us rather than, we didn't have biz devs. We didn't have like outreach at all, really. We literally just created a scenario where brands would come to us through events, through, content that we were doing, through like results that we were doing, through word of mouth, because you have to make yourself appealing, and there's nothing less appealing than someone who's like really clingy and really keen and trying to like really sort of knock down the doors. And so we had to create a scenario where luxury brands would be like, okay, they're quite cool. I've noticed them. They're quite cool. Like, okay, we've got, that now we'll approach them. So our entire marketing and biz dev was around inbound, not outbound.
It must be really tough because you've got to be super patient, I imagine.
You do and you don't, but it's also safer, right? Because if you build up that traction, it's harder to get going with that, but actually it's a much more consistent revenue stream because you're not reliant on someone always being messaging and always messaging at the right time. So, for example, our SEO is phenomenal. Like you typed in anything around luxury digital agency, like we invested a lot of time in that, but we were then, and you don't lose those rankings overnight, unlike with paid. So actually, I would argue it's a lot more healthier return long term. It takes longer to get there, but once you are there, I think it's a much healthier pipeline.
Do you think that's why you were bought by private equity rather than competitors?
Well, we were bought by another agency backed by private equity. So they were kind of going through, so we were bought by a company called Crowd. And they were basically a big agency who were looking for, and again, kind of probably a testament to how luxury worked. They really struggled with luxury brands because they weren't luxury. So luxury brands didn't want to work with them. So for them, like acquiring someone like us opened up a whole new sort of clientele for them. So it sort of made sense there. So I think our niche and our clients, our clients were sexy, right? Like, the irony thing is a lot of luxury brands don't have the budgets that people think. So like, we had Bugatti compared to say Volvo's digital marketing budget, it wouldn't hold a candle to it, but like it's a far sexier, more interesting brand. And so that added a sort of glamour to us, which I think made us more appealing.
Basically just logo whores, just like
yeah,
collecting as many as you can.
Yeah. I mean, you watch any age, like, one of the running jokes about agencies, you look at like who brands they've worked with, right?
Yeah.
Most of them have, they might have, there's one like here Bentley on there because they did a postcard for them once. Like, you stretch the truth, and you have to as a young agency owner. You kind of, one of the more frustrating positions to be in is knowing you can do the work, but no one giving you a chance. You have to play the game a little bit. But yeah, like, some of the brands that we had were about as cool as they come, and that definitely had an allure to it.
So when you was doing your earn-out, is that when the content started?
Yes. So our earn-out was fairly restrictive. So Chris and I were sort of very entrepreneurial. We've always sort of done things. But our earn-out was fairly restrictive in the sense of what we could and couldn't do. So we couldn't start other businesses. We couldn't, do other things. And so the content thing kind of started off the back of that. Plus, we were fairly active on LinkedIn and stuff. So we'd already started to see the sort of benefit of personal brand and sort of adding to it. And so we decided to kind of move into the video space. So we sort of invested in like videographer and stuff to kind of help us with that. And yeah, slowly started to build out from there, and it just sort of took off, really.
What was the goal when you started the content?
Honestly, it was because we'd had a successful business story, right? In the sense of, we'd done the exits, we'd done a successful acquisition, but we were sort of aware that we could see how easily doors opened if people knew you. And for us, like, bear in mind, like, when we started, we didn't have a network, we didn't have anything. We knew how hard it was. Like, anything to kind of make it easier by increasing sort of personal brand element for us was sort of a no-brainer. So that's kind of, and because we sort of started it together, that made it a bit more fun, a bit more enjoyable. And yeah, it sort of grew from there.
Is there like a competition between you and Chris of like who's growing quicker?
Honestly, no, not really. To be honest, I think there's always like a little bit of, how did yours do so well, and all that sort of thing. But no, to be honest, we're so close. Like, he's genuinely just the most incredible creator you'll ever see. So just very chuffed for him and delighted that I've got a piece of it, really.
What was the first opportunity that came from you building your personal brand and creating content? What was the first thing you was like, oh shit?
So I think my TikTok took off first out of all my channels, and just a couple of videos just suddenly went viral, and it was just the sheer numbers for me that overnight, I think it was 400k views or something in like sort of 24 hours, and I just remember thinking like, that's absolutely wild. Like that 400,000 people. Bear in mind, all I'd done was sit in my bedroom. That sounds like I'm going down another content route in my living room.
Exclusive.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the membership.
Yeah, the OnlyFans account's finally being opened. No, so it was in my living room. Videographer, we just filmed something, and then 400,000 people. So I think for me, it was like the sheer numbers, and then off the back of that, it just spiraled from there, really.
Fair play. I mean, going back to what you said at the start around being so young managing people, a lot of your content now is around bad managers, bad bosses, what people can do better. Do you think that's, you have so much knowledge because you were so thrown in the deep end almost, and being in such a like, shit, I need to figure this out myself? It wasn't like you worked your way up to being 35 years old in the corporate ladder, and then you as a manager, then you've started a business and you already have that knowledge. It was figuring it out at the time.
Yeah, good question. I mean, to be honest, it's interesting. I get branded like a career expert and HR expert. I'm not that. I'm really not. I just, a lot of all the knowledge I have is on a sort of practical level. I think it's a combination. Yes, I've done it. I mean, people can disagree with me all they want online about certain things, but no one can take away the fact that I've actually done that. And I think I'm an unusual creator to go from business to creator rather than creator to business. I think usually it's the other way around. The second point is, to be honest, I get shared so many stories. You just learn through that. I've probably received over 200,000 stories over the last 18 months in regards to like, this happened to me, this is what's happened, what can I do, all of that. So it's been a huge eye-opener in regards to just how poor, generally speaking, like management is. Though since I've kind of got into that, I've sort of found out a lot more in regards to why that might be. But yeah, I think the honest truth is all of my knowledge is from a very practical perspective of I've done this for like 11, 12 years now. I've done some things right. I've done some things horribly wrong. I've done a lot very much in between. And yeah, I think that's where it all comes from, really.
So you said 18 months. Is that how long you've been posting content?
Yeah, about that. So I think it was March or April last year I probably started.
1.5 million followers in 18 months is pretty insane.
Yeah, but I think that's a representative of what I talk about, right? I mean, because you've seen my content. I couldn't do less for it, right? I'm incredible. I always am a very lazy creator. I don't script anything. I don't like have fancy edits. I don't. Literally, it's just me in a living room with a blank wall in a white t-shirt. Like I don't do anything special now. So when I think about why I've grown so quickly, I think it's a much more representative of how people are feeling about work rather than necessarily me doing anything like particularly magical. As much as I'd like to think it is my sparkling personality, I think sadly it's probably not.
I think relatability comes into it though, right? People feel the same way you do, and then that's why they relate with it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, everyone's had a bad boss, right? I mean, the numbers are staggering. I think it's a stat knocking around at the moment. I think 35% of people at the moment think they're working for their worst boss ever right now. Like, I mean, that's about as relatable as it can. And that's what's quite interesting. Like, one of the things I enjoy most is when I read a story, people start trying to say, oh, that's definitely hospitality, or oh, no, I'm telling you that's car dealerships, or I'm telling you that's recruitment, or that's 100% the US. No, that's definitely in Germany. Like, it seems to be one of the very few things that can unite the world in quite a partisan thing is the fact that someone's worked for someone shitty at some point. So I think that's just what I got lucky, and I tapped into a sort of wave of genuine, probably discontent at the moment in working life, and
so
that's how it happened.
Why was that the content strategy? If you spent 12 years in business, you've acquired, you've sold, you've done marketing, that seems like a completely off-piece thing to do around management and bosses.
I agree and disagree. I think the problem a lot of entrepreneurs have is they really do think people want to hear from them more than they do. Because, look, I'm very fortunate, right? I sold my business at 29. From a monetary perspective, I was very lucky, all of that sort of thing. But, like, I've not done anything that special in the sense of I'm not a Richard Branson. I'm not, like, one of those absolute... And so, like, the idea that everyone would then want to hear, like, loads of business advice from me is kind of a little bit silly. So, for me, I think you've got to make the content the hero because, I'm a nothing, right? Obviously, I've got a few followers and I'm fortunate in how I've gone in my career so far. But, like, in the sort of grand scheme of things, I'm about as small a fish as it comes. So, the idea that I should be the personality and the hero of my brand and my content, I just thought was a bit silly. And so the boss stuff, I don't know, the thing that frustrated me about this, right, and I spent a lot of time talking about this, is I obviously believe all the stories I say are pretty reprehensible and terrible behaviour, but it bugs me from a commerciality perspective, an entrepreneur perspective, because you're an idiot if you do that from a sort of monetary perspective as well. Like, you're not going to grow your business if these sort of things are happening in your company. And so what I always say is, like, this is your chance for an absolute win-win, where not only you as the business owner look like a hero because you're doing the right thing, but it will actually help you commercially as well. And I just really liked that idea. Like, I've always been a big carrot over stick person in how I approach companies. I do have quite a strong belief in, like, I do think some ways in which people make money are pretty unacceptable, and I don't have much respect for it.
What?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot now. Okay, I don't have much. I don't get impressed by people who just buy property, for example. I find that your sort of distinct qualification seems to be you were born in the 80s or the 70s and just happen to, not people who build properties, by the way. I have absolute respect for that because it's so hard to do, but the people who then just purchase them and then flog them, I don't have that much respect. I think that's a pretty easy gig. I know that'll get clipped and be pretty unpopular, but like I just don't see how that's a hard thing to do when properties only go up in value. Like, I really do struggle to see how that's and then you look at like home ownership. I'm obviously in a generation where, you know, the vast majority of my peers can't buy a property, so that kind of adds into it. So I've sort of core beliefs like that. But overall, I do think of myself as a very ambitious person who wants to build the best businesses possible and the most successful businesses possible. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it works, really.
So what's the next business? What's your new mission?
So I've got, obviously, done my content, but I've got my new company called Gaia, which is a green tech venture. Essentially, I find this a really interesting space. I think green tech and health tech are the two big sectors for the next 10, 15 years, maybe crypto, but definitely like those two. And for me, why I find it such an interesting space is because it's a real commercial meets politics, meets science, there's so many things going on in that space. And the innovation's incredible. Like, some of the tech we're talking about is absolutely next level. And essentially what we do is we build out online products to kind of allow people to kind of achieve the specific climate goals that are being set out. So governments are legislating, often for the very right reasons, but within those sensible legislations comes disruption through certain sectors. So we build out products that kind of allow those sectors to kind of achieve those goals, not dodge them, but achieve them. But I just find the space fascinating, like the sort of misinformation voids, the like massive politics that kind of go into it. But within that, and this is what I always say, right, even if you don't believe the science, the commercial opportunity is absolutely incredible. And look, if you don't believe the science, that's fine, you know, sure. But what I say is, like, either at some point as a country, we're either going to be selling the tech or purchasing it. That's just a fact. Over the next 10, 15 years, at some point, we're going to look back and say either we're going to have to spend a lot of money getting the tech in, or we're going to create the tech and actually do it. So I get really frustrated when people use it as a political football, when in fact you're saying, actually, this is one of the best commercial opportunities the country has. So that's why I'm in green
Was
tech.
that the main reason? You just saw the commercial writing on the wall?
Commercial writing, for sure, but I just find it really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting sector. The tech is unbelievable. Like, some of the new things that are coming out are just absolutely everything from like energy efficiencies through to like how grid management could happen, through to like all the new natural assets that are coming out. So we have a marketplace which sell natural assets. We've got this new BNG scheme, which is really interesting, but like things like waste tokens, urban cooling token, like all these sort of new things are coming out. And, you know, some will fail, some will do really well, but like, I do feel quite strongly that I want to be a part of it. So yeah, that's kind of why I'm in there.
You founded that about a year ago, right?
About a year ago, yeah. It's basically at the end of my earnout.
So in that first year, has there been the results you've achieved? Do you feel like your content has helped towards that in any way?
Oh, 100%. Like 100%.
In what ways?
Well, firstly, we did a small SCIS round, and the fact that I had my content profile made such a big difference. But just the way I get onto like panels and speaking gigs and all of that, like the fact that, you know, I can just message most people now and I'll get a response. That's nothing to do with Gaia. We're a tiny, small startup with, you know, 7 employees. It's everything to do with the fact that I've got 1.5 million followers and a huge amount of people sort of are aware of what I'm saying. So, you know, I've you know, got access to, you know, people in the government, like the new government, you know, trying to sort of get on workshops there. Like just the amount of doors that open because you have a big personal brand is I cannot put a worth on it. It's absolutely incredible.
Do you think the personal brand of the founder is more important than the company brand?
I think the founder brand is always going to be bigger than the company brand. I think the company brand has a part to play for sure. But in regards to like how you get something going in particular, but even like, you know, I mean, you could point to any sort of famous founder, as it were, they're going to be bigger than their actual company. So I think just because people invest in people as much as they do a company, I think the personal brand is always going to be bigger.
Do you think with your content you're going to change it over time to help that business even further?
I don't know is the answer. I don't have much of a strategy in that sense. I find some things interesting. I've got ideas in regards to like where I want my content to go. But I don't, again, I think the worst thing I could do is like niche down really and just start talking about green tech. Like that's, even though I want to, that's just not really how it's going to work.
I mean, if you're starting again, maybe that would make sense, but with already built an audience, but there's no need to.
But even starting again, I think personal brand, I think you need to be broader than your niche. I think your business needs to be niche, but I think your personal brand needs to be pretty broad, because I don't know that, like, if I start talking about green tech, right, there's not that many people that are interested in it. And so all the opportunities I would have got because of my personal brand that's helped my company, I just wouldn't have any access to in any other way. So it's a real sort of interesting, because obviously I spent the first half of this podcast talking about how you need to niche down as a business. But actually, I guess from a personal brand perspective, I think broad is good. I really do.
How much of your personal do you share in your content?
Not as much as perhaps. I get asked a lot of questions, so not much actually, if I'm being honest. To the extent where like people ask me questions and I go, "Oh my god, I didn't actually realize people just didn't know that about me." I'm relatively private in that sense. I mean, again, I think I'm still getting quite new to being someone who gets a lot of, because I'm still relatively new to the content game. The idea that people are interested in my private life at all, I find it like ridiculous in a lot of ways, because I just don't consider myself someone that people care enough about to actually care about my personal life. But I'm pretty open in regards to like what I believe and what I think about. So if people ask me questions, I'm pretty upfront about it. Do
you think that will change over time? Do you think you'll start to open up more about you personally?
Honestly, I've got no idea. I really, and also I'm aware, like, if I start, if I bring my wife into it, she's not signed up for that sort of stuff. So I'm very sort of conscious about that as well. I guess obviously people are quite aware, like my relationship with Chris, but he's hardly a non-public figure. So I don't know, is the honest truth. I'm open to it if people really want to know a bit more about me. But I think, like, going back to what I said at the start, I do think the reason my content does well is because it's about the content necessarily, not rather about me trying to force my name into everything.
What's something that most people don't know about you that perhaps they should?
The fact that I'm a serious entrepreneur, in the sense of I'm an incredibly competitive entrepreneur. Like, I really do want to be as successful as possible. I think a lot of people, like, I get called out for, like, I don't know, just weird things. You just don't get it. Like, you really, really don't. So I really do view myself as a very competitive person, wants to build the best companies possible, the best, the most successful company. I just have quite a strict view in regards to how I think the best way to do that is, and that kind of what fuels a lot of my content. So I think for me, people always get quite surprised that I had a business and sold it, and I've got another business, and working very hard to kind of grow it as much as possible, and I want it to be the best that it can be. So I think probably that. But yeah, I guess we can find out in the comments, right?
Nice. Well, speaking of which, how do you deal with that? Because I'm assuming, as all content creators do, you get a shit ton of negative comments, haters, critics, trolls, arseholes, as we call them.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a numbers game, right? So I think that I say this story quite a bit actually, but I do remember, like, vividly, there was like a picture on Instagram with like some, like, just generally some adorable kittens on there. Like, it was a clip, like, they were rescuing kittens, they were coming out of like the grass, and it was just like one of the sweetest, like one of those nice moments. And there was still somehow negative comments, and I just don't think, like, well, if they haven't got a chance, like, I've got no chance. And so for me, like, if I do a post, right, if it's got 30,000 likes and 30 negative comments, you can take those ratios, right? I think where I struggle more than anything else is when, and this the one sort of downside to social is, you can't be nuanced. It's got to be very black and white. You've got to come out in a very sort of sense of, like, this is a good boss, this is a bad boss. And you can't introduce sort of context and the two reasons are, one, you haven't got enough time, like your clips are 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes long, but two, as soon as you add context, people will misunderstand you and then they'll go straight to the comments. And so for me, where I get really frustrated, like, if someone disagrees with me because they just disagree with me, totally fine. If you're going to be one of those weird trolls, that doesn't bother me either. Like, you do you. But it's when people have misunderstood what I say and jump to the comments, that's where you just sit there going, oh no, that's, you've misunderstood me. And then of course you try and respond on a comment. So I've actually got the habit of deleting those videos. If someone's if there's enough of a number to suggest people have misunderstood what I said, I just delete them, because I just can't be bothered to deal with responding to comments saying the same thing over and over again.
Also sitting on the fence, or not even sitting on the fence, but giving all the context and be like, well, in this specific case, it doesn't land as well. When you're very strong in an opinion in A or B, it always just, people either really agree or really disagree, and that always performs better,
Yeah,
right?
plus sometimes there's no right answer. There are a lot of management and work and business related questions where you're kind of in a rock and a hard place and you've got to make a tough call. And I talk about that a lot as well. Like, one of the hardest things, for example, is, removing toxic people from the business who are high performers for the business. Like, that's not an easy decision. Or, there was a clip the other day where a woman, this happened, it was about what management did to her. And like, I sort of gave my opinion and it was one of those ones that was too nuanced. People misunderstood it. But then you sort of point out to yourself that so many people misunderstood it. I probably just didn't articulate myself very well, and you got to own that as well. But sometimes there's no right answer, and so you, by definition, I think that's one of the big problems with social. And you look at the politics at the moment, is you can't have any sort of genuine debate on social anymore. You just have to come out and say this is wrong, or this is bad, or this is great, rather than being, look, these are the two options and this is the pros for one and this is the pros for the other, which is often the case, but you can't do that. And that's where I think is why everyone's getting so polarized, and also probably the thing I struggle with most about social.
So if you've got a content idea and you think, I've got a pretty balanced argument to this, do you just go, fine, I'm going to pick A or B, or do you just not do that video?
I probably wouldn't, because I don't want to lie, right? I probably just wouldn't pick to do that video. Sometimes it's okay, and sometimes if I think I can sort of see, I can see how it's going. Again, if it's an easy discussion, I can do it. But if it's like a real sort of, here are the two arguments, and this is why I kind of agree with both sides, I just wouldn't do it, just because you just can't. Like, if it was like a bigger show like this, that's totally fine. And, I think longer form content, that's where you have those chats. But those short sort of 2-minute clips, not a chance. You can't do it. You just can't.
We kind of do it on purpose in a way. Like, with the podcast, there's always the whole conversation and the context. But we know if you're editing a clip, it's like, well, if I just leave out a bit of context here, that's going to piss somebody off and it's going to cause comments, it's going to go viral. It's like, I'm going to do that then. And you kind of sell your soul to the algorithm devil a little bit.
For sure. I mean, sure, you have to play the game, and, and I think that's also part of the problem, right? Is you get locked into your audience. So like, I'm very lucky. I really do believe in my content. But like, if I wanted to suddenly pivot to be like boss or great, I wouldn't have, the views would go down pretty quickly. So I kind of get locked in a little bit on that. And I think that's the other big issue with, I think politics is a great example. Like all these YouTubers and stuff, they can't ever veer away from their message now, because their entire monetary strategy is based on the people who follow them. People follow them for very specific views. And if they diverge like a tiny bit from those views, they'll just go to another YouTuber who does believe to validate their views. And that's how and that's why this, I think one of the most dangerous things in society is this rise of these content creators in the political space, because they have to say, even if they don't believe, and I know for a fact a lot of them don't believe what they say now, but they have to keep saying it, because their entire business and their entire monetary strategy, their revenue comes from saying the things that people who follow them want them to say. And the second they veer away from that, they'll go to another YouTuber. And that's why, one, we're seeing like such aggressive moves to the left and right, because middle of the way just isn't interesting, even though that's where the vast majority of people sit. And two, you just end up with these people just saying things they fundamentally don't believe, but they don't know that they don't believe it, and so they have to keep saying it because that's where their audience is and that's where their money depends on. So yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I find it a really interesting space at the moment, just now that I am a creator and I'm sort of very much in the weeds of it all. I'm seeing, because I worked on digital, right, for 10 years, so I fundamentally understand how social algorithms work, because we were paid to beat them by brands. So it's so interesting to going from that to now being someone who has his own personal brand, who's sort of working within the algorithms. I find it such an interesting space at the moment.
It's quite scary though to think that people's opinions don't matter or something. When they get to a certain size, like, I need to have this opinion regardless.
For sure, and it's where misinformation. Like, I could say a statement now, and it could be completely ludicrous, and I could make a really convincing case, and we could probably clip it up in a way that made it look really, really convincing. Like, I could say something.
Go on then.
Yeah, I could say, I don't know, like, bananas cause erectile dysfunction, and I could probably make a pretty good argument of why bananas do cause erectile dysfunction.
Explains a lot.
Wow. But you could, because what would happen, right? I'd say that, and then I'd have a graph and say, look, because you can see the rise, because causation's not, during all the 5G with the hotspots, you could easily throw up a graph and say, look, here's the rise of men with erectile dysfunction, here's the consumption of bananas, look at that, it's going down. And I bet the graph goes up, right?
Yeah.
And then someone says, oh, but like surely wouldn't do it, and you go like all the big supermarkets, you say, well, of course the big supermarkets are in it, because basically it's one of their key selling products. They're not going to damage their own revenue, so they don't care, so they're going to push it. And then you say, well, actually, but this study, oh, well, you wouldn't trust that sort of science because that sort of, and like suddenly, and
There's always a way, isn't there?
Exactly. There's always, and you can, and that's what's terrifying about content, right? You can literally make a case for anything, and as long as you can vaguely talk out of your ass very, very quickly, you can suddenly start to make yourself sound very convincing, and then you throw the graphics in, you throw in all how easy it is to edit stuff. That's
Some
how
complicated
misinformation.
words.
Yeah, that's how misinformation.
Pay Huberman to do an ad read.
Exactly, yeah. So we could literally do a video, and I promise you, we could convince some people, and then it would get clipped up in the wrong space, and then that goes viral, and like everyone goes, oh, but you can just revoke it. Say, yeah, but it's been clipped like 90 times, and it's got 800,000 views. Like it's out there, it's done. So it's a weird space, content. It really is. And I'm obviously, I think it's so positive in so many ways, but it's a space I've been thinking about quite a lot recently. I guess, especially with all the elections that have happened.
That's what I was about to ask you. Is how big of a part do you think social and content played in the election?
Which one, US or UK?
US.
Like, enormous. Like, you can't, I mean, there's no comparison. It was literally the single biggest driver. I mean, the views that people get now, I mean, I remember the first year as it was 4 months I started, I realized I was getting more views than Sky News was.
Wow.
And you think how much do you see like the whole, and like I hate the phrases mainstream media and new media, like, because I don't think they're used in the right ways, but they're absolutely right. Like, people do not get their information from journalists anymore.
Doesn't feel honest.
Well, it doesn't feel honest because they're not like, I generally don't, and I by the way, this isn't me like picking a side in any sense of the word. I think there's examples of both, but they call themselves journalists, and I find that quite dangerous because they don't hold themselves to the same journalistic standards. They just sit there and retweet stuff, and they're on their groups, and their groups get shared. Everyone's got to post this, they all go post that, and no one verifies and fact checks. And again, like, there are some phenomenal ones out there, and a lot of people do it in a very admirable way, but there's no checks or balances on them at all. Like, you could just post what you want. And I do find that quite when you sort of look at the next sort of few years. So in regards to US, yeah, I mean, the Republicans absolutely nailed that side of it in the sense of winning sense. Like, they absolutely dominated the new media, for want of a better phrase. I mean, obviously Musk was sort of kingpin of that, but like the Joe Rogan podcast, that was unbelievable, like the sort of impact that had.
Did you see the controversy around the trending? So if you
No, I didn't
searched
see that.
Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, the video wouldn't come up.
Okay, so these sort of stuff I do find interesting, right? Because one, like, this is a bit of an area I do know a lot about because I understand, because I had an SEO agency. I understand how Google works. So like, search doesn't work quite as simple as people think. So one thing, you get different searches depending on where you are. Two, it searches based on intent. And so if, for example, like one of the things Donald Trump used to complain about was, how anytime you search Donald Trump, it was just negative news that was being shown. But that was because most people view Donald Trump to an extent in a negative sense. And so when you look at like global search terms, and so when you sort of say things like, oh, the controversy of Google was like high, like, I struggle to believe that, if I'm being honest, because I understand how like the SEO algorithm works.
Well, he got 40 million views in 48 hours and it didn't go onto YouTube trending. You know, the Sidemen can upload a video that gets 2 million views in a weekend. It'll be number one on trending.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't check. I obviously wasn't checking, so I can't sort of validate that. But I do know for a fact, like, a lot of people spend a lot of time complaining about how like Google's biased and stuff without understanding like how the algorithm actually works. So yeah, I obviously don't know exactly what's going on there. I mean, I suspect there was all sorts happening all over the place in every single part. Like, it was a pretty brutal election. Like, all bets were off. I think anyone could say, both sides were just doing whatever they could to win. It gets pretty nasty. So I don't like to sort of fixate on single points, but yeah, I just think content and media just played an absolutely enormous part in that election. And it was, it was pretty wild.
Going back to what you were saying about people having opinions because that's their audience's opinion rather than theirs. Do you often get stories come to you where you think, I agree with the boss here, like, the employer's wrong, and do you just not record those?
No, I do a lot of bosses where a lot of people, a lot of people don't send me. It's less stories because actually fewer people send me stories where they're in the wrong and their boss is in the right.
Yeah.
But a lot of the questions I get asked, I do very much side with. But don't forget, I side with a lot of my content is about how to grow a successful business. And so a lot of the time I will say, look, this is kind of why they do it. One of the things I get asked most, for example, is they go, oh, it's so unfair. This is the best one I get. Oh, don't you think it's so unfair that they prorated my holiday? So like I have to pay money back because I took too much holiday and then I quit my job and now I have to pay money back. And I said, no, it's actually totally fair the business is asking for that. Otherwise, come January, everyone would take 3 weeks off, then quit their job. Like you get your it's annualized pro rata basis. So stuff like that, I will always push back on. Storage wise, it's less because literally people aren't going to send me a story where they go, look how I'm the arsehole and my boss is an absolute hero. But I get sent a lot of best boss stories, which I share, and I've got a new series around like bosses. So that. And then a lot of the questions I get asked, I will be saying, look, this is why they're doing it, and this is actually quite fair. So all of my content, if you want like a snapshot of what I think my content is, I just think it's how to grow a good company. If I'm being honest, how to be successful. And I just happen to think that being successful goes hand in hand with actually, because also no one disagrees with me. No one sits there. No CEO I ever spoken to says, I wish my team was really unmotivated and unincentivized and hacked off. Like no one thinks that. So I just don't buy the fact that people want that. And so it's actually just all how do you kind of get them to that stage. And it starts off with, don't do this fairly revolting stuff, but also you're missing 3 or 4 like open goals a week here just by not doing some basic stuff.
But do you get employees send you messages like, oh, this is unfair because, where you read it and then you actually say, no, like I'm on the brand side here, you're wrong? Because you said they wouldn't send something where they think they're wrong, but if they're trying to claim they're hard done by, but you think, actually, no, you're not.
Yeah, loads of those.
And do you publish quite a lot of those?
Yeah, quite a lot. A lot of the Ask Ben series where people ask me questions, I'll often say, no, come on, you're being a little bit silly here. Yeah, totally. I've no qualms whatsoever siding with the brand, because often, I'm in that position, right? Like I totally understand how it is, and I also understand like it's amazing how often it's good intentions poorly executed. Like it's amazing how often that happens. And also it's just perhaps a slight misunderstanding of like how companies work as well and all that sort of thing. So yeah, loads of examples.
In terms of views, how do those ones do in comparison?
Way worse. People like the negativity.
Yeah.
People like the hacked off stories. As soon as honestly all the content I'm like most proud of gets very few. It's always the way. But like as soon as I did a big series like best bosses in Britain, which have done pretty well, but like nowhere near like. So yeah, it's one of those sad facts that negativity does tend to do better online.
And the other side of it is your audience are probably largely employees that feel hard done by. So they want to like the video where it's like, yeah, that's a shit boss, rather than the one that's like, that's a shit employee.
Yes and no. I mean, a lot of people like are disillusioned with work, but a lot of them are managers who really want to do, follow my content because they really want to do a good job and do a lot. So I get a lot of management actually following me, which is kind of the dream, right? Because that ultimately, if I'm going to make a difference, I need to be talking to those people as much as I'm talking to more junior or lower down the rung.
Would you spin a business off of the content which is specifically around this?
I'm keen to do a management course at some point, because I think it would help a lot of people. And a lot of management is so easy, and you just need the formula and you need the documents so you can just fill in basically. So I'm keen to do that at some point. When that happens, I'm not sure. But I think it's just it's something that I think would help a lot of people, if I'm being honest. So yeah, it's something I would definitely do at some point.
Tell us about the Best Boss series.
Yeah. It kind of spun off the fact that I talk about like negativity on social a lot, and I'm absolutely contributing to that. So if and I like a lot of the comment, I started to notice there was a trend in my comments that was just like, oh, all bosses are terrible, and I was like, oh, this is my bad. Like I've gone too far here, because that's not my message, right? My message shouldn't be, my boss should be, look, this is a terrible boss, but these are great ones. Like this is what you're looking for. And so for me, I thought actually let's celebrate like the best bosses. And I thought about like doing like longer form like interviews with public figures, but I thought actually that's not what people are looking for. I think what'd be nice is to find those bosses that would never expect any recognition, just do it because that's what they do and that's what they believe in. So we basically put out a huge blast, basically saying, if anyone's got a good boss or an amazing boss or have had an amazing boss, like please let me know. We kind of limited it to like SMEs because again, like people, I don't think people would be interested in like talking to like a CEO of like a Fortune 500 company, even though there are some good ones out there. Like I don't think that's what people are looking for either, because most people actually have a small, medium-sized company. That's where a lot of people work. So we got loads of nominations. I was really, really touched by how many we got, and we sort of narrowed it down to the top 5. And then basically we kind of thought, well, we want to talk to these people, but we don't just want to disrupt their day and not give them anything. So we got them £5,000 from Fiverr to kind of who they sponsored the video series. And so we then would just surprise them at their workplace and kind of give them prize. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But it's a lot more effort than me just sitting in my living room talking randomly to a phone. But yeah, it was really nice.
You didn't get paid for that, did you, from Fiverr?
No. Like I do, you know, again, I'm very transparent. I make good money on my content because I've got a lot of followers. And I'm very happy to partner with brands and get paid for it, and I'm never going to apologize for that. But for that series, again, going back to like what it just that's not a series for me to make money on. That just doesn't sit right with me. So it was about the bosses. It was about celebrating them. They deserved the award. It would have felt weird for me to benefit from that.
Have you had many partnerships and sponsorships with brands?
Yeah. It's pretty popular. You know, the B2B space for creators is a really good one. You know, I'm fortunate to be approached by a lot of brands. I'm very selective with the ones I do partner with. You know, I'm pretty strict in partnering with only brands that would kind of enhance or kind of work within my content, because otherwise you're just
selling yourself,
doing it. Yeah, a little bit. So, but, you know, I've got a team to kind of help with content now, which obviously bills have to be paid and all of that. So yeah, the brands I partner with are very much in the B2B space, who kind of, you know, for example, like I partner with brands who like like CV writing capabilities, or like training, will create training videos to help your team, you know, all the stuff that would like basically work as a solution for the problem that I'm describing as a boss is probably the best way to describe it. And then just sort of things like that. Yeah.
How much has the personal brand made in the 18 months?
It's made a good amount of money. I'm not big at sort of sharing like specific. I don't. Like you'll never see me do a video like this, how I made my first million or stuff like that. I just don't. Again, I guess going back to that private thing, I'm not a huge one on sharing like direct how much I make, but I'm very fortunate. I make very good money.
Okay. And is the main revenue stream through brand partnerships or creator funds? Or?
Brand partnerships mostly.
Yeah.
Creator funds, no. Obviously, I guess my main business. I sold my business. Obviously, I was very fortunate there. I've got my new company Gaia, which it's first year we're building, so I'm not taking a salary on that yet. So but I've got investment. You know, I'm lucky.
Yeah. And how big's your team at the moment?
For my personal
brand,
I have a videographer. I have someone who helps me on like the more personal brand side, so like sort of helps me like find content to react to and find stories for me to react to and stuff. And then I've got an agent who kind of handles any commercial bits.
Oh wow! And are they all full time?
No, agents, just an agent. And then videographer is about 2 days to 3 days a week, and then personal brand's full time.
You've talked about your strategy with your content a bit and said you don't open up much about yourself personally. You a bit more broad. Those are things that can sometimes make it harder to grow at the start. Mm-hmm. So what have you done, do you think, that's made it so easy for you to grow so quickly? Or why is the reason you've got 1.5 million followers in such a short amount of time?
I just talk about things that people can relate to.
Relatability.
It goes back to what we said. Like everyone's had a bad boss. Everyone can experience it. Like, and what's interesting is when I look at the stories that do well, like we've had some wild stories. Like we've had things like bomb scares. We've had things like, you know, like truly just go like, that's probably never ever happened apart from that one time. Like really like wow. So they're not the ones that do the best. The ones that do the best are you've shafted me on annual leave. You've clipped me on pay. You've interfered with my personal life. It's stuff that everyone can go, yeah, that my boss does that. It really fucks me off. Like, and so I think it's just, again, like I don't really put myself at the front of the content to the extent where actually people often actually don't know my name, which is actually quite funny.
That guy who talks about the bad bosses.
Yeah, no, listen, bad boss guy, and actually, so, and so like obviously, and actually, ironically, you know, we were talking about Google earlier. If you type in like my name, like Ben Askins' worst boss is what comes up as a suggested search. Which
Great.
Is
so how's hiring for your new company
going? Not phenomenal for my future employment prospects, but yeah, no, it's interesting.
How is building the personal brand affected your personal life? Because you've blown up, you know, really quickly. And if you are quite a private person, has that been challenging to deal with?
Yeah, I get recognised all the time.
Really?
All the time in like really obscure places now as well. So, you know, London, you go, okay, I kind of get it. But like, I've been recognised in like a small co-op in the outskirts of a small town in New Zealand. I've been recognised in South Africa, Spain, Greece.
Wow. Like
I was on an island in Ithaca and like the waiter recognised, you know, like just, it's you get recognised a lot. Which is, it's taken getting used to. And I think people like, I think content creators sit between, I guess, what you call like celebrities, and in the sense of like, I think content creators, people feel a more of a personal connection to in a lot of ways. So people are actually more inclined to come up to you and say hi and stuff, which I really like. But the thing I find funniest is when people can clearly recognize people, can't remember from where. And so you can see people sort of staring at you too, like,
where do I know him from?
Yeah. Have we met before is often a question I get asked. But yeah, I'm staggered by how many people recognize me and come up to me. It's one of the more things that are getting used to. It's one of the bigger things to happen from a creative perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions have seen your content.
Yeah, I think I worked out, I think it's about 750 million views in the last 12 to 15 months.
Tens of millions, yeah? You're a bit off for that.
Yeah, but some might repeat watch, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So-
Individuals.
Yeah,
Unique
individuals.
views.
Yeah, staggering numbers. Like really, really crazy numbers.
Wow, how humbling.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
Like, again, and that go back to like why I think social is hopefully a positive for everything in the sort of net output. But you know, like I said, it's just me and it didn't have a huge. That the fact that I can speak to that many people is kind of wild. Especially as all I'm doing is basically in my flat in London filming. Like that. That's it. Like it's when you put it like that, it just seems a bit weird.
So you talked about relatability. What other top tips would you give to someone who's new, wanting to start creating content, be it on TikTok, be it podcast content? Anyone who's looking to grow their personal brand and create content, what would be the tips you'd give them?
Just get on with it. Just start posting. The first one, honestly, I shared. I look back. I've got like some of my older stuff is so bad. It's so cringe. Like for some reason, like the lighting's weird. So I'm very orange. Like the camera's so close to me. Like I'm talking gibberish. You're gonna hate your first piece, but like you can't get to your 10th or your 100th without doing your first one. So just kind of get on and actually let them shape. People start to respond in a certain way. You get a feel for like what's working, what's not. It's only guesswork. Like even now, I will post something thinking I reckon this is gonna do really well, and it will do terribly, and then there'll be like a throwaway piece that I've just cobbled together, and it will just go absolutely bananas.
Let's not talk about bananas.
Yes, it's true. It's a toxic topic for today.
I bought some yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, honestly, can you imagine if we actually started that rumour?
Yeah. You fucked it, Ben.
We'll make a graph.
Yeah.
So you've gone from short form content to long form because you launched a YouTube channel now.
Yes.
How's that?
Okay. I'm. Do I like you? I love YouTube. I think long form. In regards to like my YouTube channel, I've not quite cracked it in the sense of like what I want to do with it yet. I keep like trying new things. I've done like the big budget production stuff. I've done the very low key, just say something and upload it sort of stuff. I'm still experimenting in regards to what I want to do with YouTube. The thing I like about YouTube most is it allows you to kind of lay out arguments and present things in a longer form way. So that's the big advantage for me. But I've not quite cracked. I think for me, it's like, I've gone down a slightly sillier route with YouTube. I sort of talk about like the top funniest emails that people have made, or like the top 5 like worst Christmas party stories, or like just bring a bit more fun into it. Because I think we take ourselves too seriously in work in general, and content creators take themselves so seriously. Some of them, I just think, please crack a smile. Like, please just vaguely like stop pretending you are. Announcing your country's going off to war, and just start to enjoy yourself a little bit. Like I'm very self-deprecating. I enjoy that. I enjoy poking fun at things. I enjoy not taking things too seriously. Like I will mock myself relentlessly because I just think it's fun to do, and that's just how people kind of enjoy things. And so I would like to do a business show, and there's something in the works that might happen soon, which is just a little bit more lighthearted, and it's less people sort of going, and this is how, and I'm gonna be a trillionaire by this, and I'm gonna my goal is, and you just think, please, you've just got to like relax a little bit and stop taking yourself so seriously. And I think people, again, if I'm looking for like an advice bit, people don't take yourself so seriously. Going back, like not that many people want to hear from you, but they'll buy into you if they like you, or they like your personality, or they like your content. Like that's kind of how you grow. Like you're not that important. I'm not that. The one thing I always say is like no one really cares about you, and I mean that in a sort of genuine sense of like, I hope they vaguely like me and they enjoy my content, but like that's it for me. That's what I want. I don't want people going around thinking Ben Askins is absolutely amazing. Like that's not my goal, and I'm kidding myself if that was my goal, because it would never happen. So yeah, just take yourself slightly less seriously, and that's why I'm experimenting with YouTube at the moment. I've not cracked it yet. It's something that's definitely going to be working on over the next year or two.
You say you didn't get up at 3 a.m. and take 2 cold plunges?
Ultramarathon. Honestly, if I'm up by I never exercise in the morning. I can't do it. I'm just too lazy. I'll just go back to bed. So I always try and exercise at lunch.
Nice.
So that'd be my advice.
How about a podcast with the YouTube channel?
Possibly. Again, I potentially would do something with Chris and I are sort of potentially talking about doing something, and so that might happen soon.
That'd be cool.
But we shall see.
Nice. Any final pieces of advice for new entrepreneurs or content creators?
Like, I mean, in my mind, those are two different groups, if that makes sense. Like, if you're, as an entrepreneur, I think, you know, especially if you're a young entrepreneur, like people, what I always thought about my business, right, is everyone would say, how's your little business? Like, people are very patronizing sometimes to young business owners. And then suddenly you reach that tipping point and they go, how's the business? And I really remember like that with Verb in our first company. You know, people were just very sort of patronizing to us very early on. So you just got to own that and ignore it, and ignore. A lot of people will be telling you won't be able to do it until you do it, and then everyone will say how obvious it was and how you got a bit lucky and how you just caught a wave and all that sort of stuff. So just drown out the noise. If you're confident in what you're doing, go for it, but like make sure you always ask for advice. And then on the content front, just have a go. Just have a go. It's quite fun. Like I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. There is something quite fun about just being able to give your honest thoughts on something. And what I love about social most, right, is giving people the opportunity to monetize hobbies and passions. And I think that's such a good thing for the world. Like so many people have so many amazing skills you just would never, ever hear about if it weren't for the opportunity that social presented. So I love that about social, the fact that people can monetize things they absolutely love. I think that's got to be good for the world and society in general. So just have a go.
Finally, who do you know that we should interview next?
Chris is always a good interview. Yeah,
I'll take that as a intro. I'm
Yeah,
sure you'll
we'll clip that and just send him it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
when you're free.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Ben, thank you very much, mate.
No, thanks for having me.
appreciate it.